My name is Christian Tabet. I'm a parent of two students at Babson College, sophomore graduating in 2018, and a freshman graduating in 2019.
Professor Stephen, is this on?
So like all parents, highly concerned about the employment of my children, of my kids, and so very delighted to be involved in this particular session. As parents, we invest a lot in our children and in their education. Hence, colleges such as Babson, we feel they are a great investment for our children. But not everybody has the same opportunity. In this part of the world, youth employment is a major challenge. Maybe not to the same extent in the UAE, but you may have heard that 50% of the population in the Middle East is under 25. So that creates a lot of challenges, particularly for the larger countries. My other side is I'm chief executive of an international oil company operating here in the United Arab Emirates. And we're constantly faced with the issue of D&I and UAE nationals development within our organizations, and to increase the number of nationals that we employ. And we've constantly been facing challenges internally about having the budgets and the capability to take on young nationals, having programs in place like internships, apprenticeships after graduation, but also the challenge of retention and ongoing development. So agencies, government agencies tend to be very, very helpful to us. So I'd like to introduce to you today His Excellency Abdullah Darmaki, who is the Acting Chief Executive Officer for the Khalifa Fund for Enterprise Development. I'll say a little bit about his career and then a little bit about His Excellency. So Mr. Al-Darmaki is the Acting Chief Executive Officer of Khalifa Fund. That's a government entity that spearheads the support and development of small and medium enterprises in Abu Dhabi. His role is integral to the strategic planning and management of the organization in alignment with the Executive Council's objectives. His Excellency comes from my industry. He comes from oil and gas on the market analysis side, but also was heavily involved in the petrochemicals area. And in 2006, Mr. Darmaki led the Abu Dhabi Polymers Park project, the first integrated downstream petrochemical cluster in the MENA region. But he transitioned from working with an oil and gas major to a government entity, and it's quite impressive how he moved from that sector to an entirely different sector. But it's very clear from our brief conversation that he's very, very passionate about the subject. And I'm sure he will, the next presentation will be really of interest. On a personal note, he's a graduate of political science from Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. He is a father as well. He has triplets, 1-year-old triplets, two girls and a boy. And also, his wife is also a career-oriented lady, being involved as a film director. So that's all from my side. The session will be moderated by Dr. Stephen Deeds, who's the Associate Professor of Politics at Babson College. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Are the mics on? Can we hear? Yes. Okay. It's a little. We can hear them now. So thank you so much for coming. And as a fellow political scientist, I'm really happy to have you here. I was wondering, just to start off, if you could tell us a little bit about the fund, what it does. I know it's been around since 2007, so some of its accomplishments.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Babson and everyone who's in this room here today to give me the opportunity to be sitting in front of you and sharing with you some information and some knowledge of what we do as an organization. And I hope that through the conversation we'll have today, I'll be able to inspire you in some areas that we've been able to successfully accomplish certain matters of improving society and dealing with different factions of civil service. Dr. Stephen, you're right. The Khalifa Fund for Enterprise Development was established in 2007. If you let me go back a few years before that, we lost a great president in 2004, Hassan al-Shahzad. And it was a big loss for everybody in the region. At that time, civil service was so large because His late Highness Sheikh Zayed was very kind and generous to employ every person who wanted to be part of civil service. And so the government was too fat. When Sheikh Khalifa became president and Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, predominantly became the crown prince, there was an extensive study that went through and said, we need to shrink civil service to a size where there's a proportionate ratio to society itself or to the population in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. So a lot of people were had to face with the knowledge that they have to find opportunities somewhere else. And that was around 2006, 2005. At the same time, the SME agenda was introduced to the government. And so they thought it was a good opportunity for the government to establish an SME agency to help those civil servants who were no longer going to be part of the civil service pool. And that was one of the main reasons as well. It's not just to encourage the young Emiratis, but also how do you deal with the government organizations that were not necessarily needed anymore. I think the first challenge we faced as an organization when we established the name Khalifa Fund. So first of all, you have the name of the president and you're called the fund. So, and we're marred with the fact that there's the marriage fund, there's a zakat fund, so people thought it was an endowment. And we had to, we had to realize from the beginning that we needed to embark on a strategy that fosters entrepreneurship. And when I say fostering entrepreneurship, that was, I would say, the most important challenge for Emiratis who wanted to explore the possibility of becoming an entrepreneur and understanding what are the challenges in establishing an enterprise. Everything from failure to taking risks to the ability to work long hours and sink your teeth into the business itself until you kind of be able to bring it up yourself. So we've actually worked on two areas. So fostering entrepreneurship was something we started on, but at the same time, we're an SME funding agency. We're 100% owned by the government. We are for UAE nationals, and I believe that throughout the GCC and even other parts of the world, you have similar agencies for citizens of that country. So I'm also for, if there's anybody here from Kuwait, I'm privileged to say to you that I am also a member of the National Fund. I'm a member of the Higher Advisory Council, so I advise the National Fund in Kuwait on how to establish itself based on what we've been able to accomplish as Khalifa Fund. We have, let me take you to the interesting part now. We've funded over about 1,100 or 1,200 SMEs from establishment. We've allocated about 1.4 billion dirhams worth of loans. I would say over 65% of those loans have gone to startups. And for people who aren't new to the region here, and I'm sorry to say this to anyone who's in a financial institution, banks don't touch startups. So someone has to take that risk, and we take the exposure and helping them get on their feet. The way that we work is we have different products for entrepreneurs to help them get on their way. We have a product for microfinancing. We have certain products for startups. We also look at existing businesses that are looking to grow. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later on. And a couple of years ago, we felt that there was a little bit of a gap between for light manufacturing. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. Today in the UAE, and I'm sure in other countries in the GCC, we have Equate, we have Capco, we have Buruj, we have SABIC, producing millions of tons of polymer petrochemicals. we ship it to China, get plastic produced over there, bring it back in here again. Sometimes we actually literally ship empty bottles of air so we can fill it up and sell it to the consumer market. So we realized that we needed to step in and create a product for that. The organization started in Abu Dhabi in 2009. I guess our leadership was very satisfied with our performance, and they said, let's change the mandate and take you nationwide. So although we are an Abu Dhabi-based government agency, we actually operate throughout the United Arab Emirates. We have offices in Ajman, Ras Al Khaimah, and Fujairah. And I'm fortunate to be here with you today to tell you a little bit about what's happening in Northern Emirates. When I joined Khalifa Fund, the first task I was given by my chairman, His Excellency Hussein Uwais, was to open branches. And I said, oh, well, this is going to be interesting. You know, people are going to have high expectations because they see what's happening in Abu Dhabi, and you're going to have to try to either meet the expectation or manage it in some shape and form. In reality, some of the best performing SMEs that we have today on our portfolio are from the Northern Emirates. I'm not saying that the ones in Abu Dhabi are not performing well, they are, but given the size of investment required and the time it takes for them to establish that business is much shorter and less of a burden on a lending agency like myself than projects in Abu Dhabi. And the main reason why is the cost of setting up a business. And maybe also sometimes some people say, well, there isn't much infrastructure in some of these emirates or cities. And maybe that's a good thing because you don't need such huge investments to start a small business, which doesn't require a lot of that infrastructure that you might want to invest in. And the other good thing, and this goes to the heart of the main topic today, is that the number of unemployed entrepreneurs that we have been, we've actually touched with has grown thanks to the fact that we've actually expanded our horizons outside Abu Dhabi Emirates.
Right. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, because I mean there is this question about whether entrepreneurship is a route to solving problems or addressing problems of youth unemployment, or whether or not a lot of the entrepreneurial activity are people mid-career that are looking to leave government jobs or other kinds of jobs that they may already have in the private sector. So I guess so this youth unemployment issue I think is an interesting key.
Well, believe you me, if I can manage to solve the problem with unemployment, I wouldn't be here. It's an ongoing issue, of course. We have to be careful on when we say the word unemployment. People are, I was just mentioning it to someone earlier, people are willing to be unemployed, and there are people who are genuinely looking for a job. I would consider, before I joined Khalifa Fund, I was very fortunate to be the Director General of the National Unemployment Agency in Abu Dhabi as well. And in my capacity there, I was faced with the fact there was thousands of people registered as job seekers. But when we created a definition with the ILO, we adopted it, we contacted every person in our database, we made sure that they fit that criteria, that number has dropped more than 60%. And that was simply because people were, for lack of a better word, selective. So I don't consider someone who is selective as an unemployed. Of course, they're looking for something better, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't take the first job. Like what I did. I mean, I was a poli-science major, and I started my career in oil and gas, and that was the reason why is because that was the first job that I could get my hands on. Right. I didn't pay me much, but I wanted to be independent. Entrepreneurship. When I go to events like the one in the G20 summit a couple of years ago in Nice, and you sit with a bunch of vibrant entrepreneurs, and they say, entrepreneurship create jobs. Unfortunately, I think this goes in most of the Gulf countries. It creates the job that don't necessarily employ the citizens of that country because they're not yet employable in that particular field, so they don't have the expertise or experience or knowledge of how to work in a small, newly established enterprise. But for that individual who's now getting the support from Khalifa Fund or from Dubai SME or from Ruwad or other institutions like ourselves, yes, they are potentially employers for generations to come. We haven't set a definition per se because, again, I have to say this, our leadership is too generous in the sense that we've been instructed that we shouldn't turn anyone away. Even if they have a job and they want to start a business, we should try to help them in the hopes, of course, like you said, Dr. Stephen, that they will leave their status in the sector that they're working for, and they are fully dedicated to their enterprise. I honestly believe we haven't seen much through that process, but I believe that it's going to come along, especially for those entrepreneurs who have been able to survive the first 2 or 3 years. I know some people say 12 months is the most difficult period. I believe it's a bit longer than just 12 months, simply because it takes more than 12 months just to set up the business. And then you need to go through another cycle of understanding where are you struggling most, so you can actually adopt yourself to a new set of challenges. So I would say, I'm comfortable with saying 3 years is a suitable period of time where people now then, after 3 years of running their business, can realize what takes precedence, my full employment job or my enterprise.
Yeah, because this question of youth unemployment, I think, gets into a couple of other different aspects of, is this, you mentioned, this question, is it a skills gap? Is it that, they need certain kinds of, business skills or skills in their private sector? Is there, something in the K through 12 education system that perhaps needs to be, changed? Or are there broader macroeconomic factors that are causing this problem of youth unemployment?
I think it's both. If we look at the grassroots, yes, I always say this to some of my colleagues in the government in Abu Dhabi. When an Emirati would-be entrepreneur comes through my doors, it's too late. You can't make them entrepreneurs. You can discover them, you can mold them, but you cannot make an 18-year-old or above an entrepreneur. That needs to be taught at a grassroots level. People used to say in the early 2000s that the education system needed to be revamped. And I would agree to some extent. And that's what's happening in the last decade at least. The government is investing a lot. We've seen that through a vast variety of institutions. You have the NYU, you have Sorbonne, you have the amazing campus of the American University of Sharjah here in Dubai as well. You have a few institutions as well. So a lot of it being invested in education, but I would, and I'm sure there's a few academics here who might hate me for saying that, but unfortunately the system still encourages people to be employed. So a lot of the students who graduate, and when I sit down in a gathering and I'm with the vice chancellor or the chancellor of these organizations just mentioned, they like to say or to state how many of their graduates have found jobs, and that goes against what I'm doing as an SME agency. So there's still a lot of work to be done on a very early stage level. So K+12 as well, for young Emiratis to start thinking or through a process where they and their families as well, because you can't do this between a student and a teacher. The families have to get involved. I just put a layman term for this. A student comes home, his father, he sits with his father, he says, listen, Dad, I've been asked to set up a small garage business. Could you be my finance manager? If the father is receptive to help him with that, then we're on the right track. But we know, I know for a fact that's not going to happen.
Right. I mean, we face similar problems in the United States around these issues. And I mean, thinking about, some of these issues that are shared across countries, one of the things that I found interesting about the Khalifa Fund is that you do have, some special focus on training people with special needs, training people that have issues of substance abuse, people that have, issues of having been incarcerated. I mean, so this is an issue in the United States as well, where we think about how do we find, jobs and make these, connect, people like this to jobs. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit about the Khalifa Fund's work in this area.
I have to say again, all these different initiatives you just mentioned, they all stem from the vision of our leadership. And believe me when I say that I'm not blowing this up. It is genuinely when His Highness says, I've just visited a prison, the state penitentiary, and I'm not happy with the situation in the sense that what happens to these inmates, these nationals when they come out of the system? Who manages them? How do they get integrated into society? and we've been asked to explore that or to try to come up with a solution for that, and we've been able to come up with a few of those. So we've always been driven by the vision of our leadership from that respect. Let me talk to you a little bit about the program that we've established with another government organization that manages people with special care needs. A few years ago, we were approached by the Zayed Higher Organization for People with Special Care Needs. It's a mouthful. The short name is ZHO. And ZHO said, we have a farm and we've identified the technology. It's called aquaponic. And it's basically recycling the water between growing vegetables and fish. So it's a system, it's a very conventional system. There's nothing innovative about it that much in the sense that it just does that. Now, they were interested in this kind of technology because, interestingly, there was a certain group of young Emiratis who have mental challenge. They perceived that as a way to treat them. So using their hands was a means of doing so. And so I put up an investment of about 4 million dirhams. So it's not that much. But for that 4 million dirhams, we set up a farm, a part of it actually. And in return, 41 young Emiratis, predominantly with Down syndrome, today are part of that project. They're not employed because, according to the Ministry of Social Affairs, you can't have them as a job, but they get paid on a reward system. So they've actually been able to improve their life. In fact, actually one of them, I know for a fact, in 8 months working in that farm, he saved up enough money to get married. And he has a similar challenge. So for 4 million dirhams, I've been able to employ 41 young Emiratis who have mental disability. We have other programs with, like you mentioned, with people with substance abuse. Again, the vision is there to help addicts from all different kind of addiction, but unfortunately, I'm not satisfied with the results so far as I would say for the other projects because of the fact that there's a loophole in the system where people kind of fall through it and you lose track, and it's very difficult to, even if you engage with them in the beginning, initial stage, it's very difficult to find out where they've gone within the system so you can actually help them. In terms of training, one of the first things I wanted to avoid in my capacity as chief executive of Khalifa Fund, and that is be held responsible for training Emiratis to become entrepreneurs. That's not what we stand for. We are an agency that's supposed to give out loans and help them get in the right track, but not make them believe that just because I've given them some knowledge of how to establish a business means now they can go out their merry way and be successful. Because the response to that is if they fail, they come back and they say, well, you're as liable as I am into this. If not, it's your fault. So I believe that it's up to the institution, the education academics to do so. And so the last 2.5 years, we've moved away from training people who come through the door to become entrepreneurs, and we've developed about 19 modular programs that is being delivered by universities. So for instance, I have an engineer, pure engineer, electrical engineer, who comes up and he says he wants to develop a software program for the drone so that it can actually rotate around an aircraft, especially when the aircraft is coming out of maintenance, because you have to check the aircraft, you have to make sure that all the bolts are in place, right, before it's given the go-ahead to fly. And usually that MAMP labor that requires is about 8 hours. He's come up with a way to program the size of the aircraft, and he can do it within half an hour. So he can do that, but he's got nothing to do with marketing the product. And so you need to empower him and give him the ability to know how to market this product, not just with Etihad Airways, but also Emirates and Qatar Airways and other carriers in the region. And so the modular program that we have today gives the individual or the groups of people the ability to go out there and take a few hours, understand the basic needs of marketing, corporate governance, legal structure framework. I mean, in fact, actually, I had this one entrepreneur one day come up to us and says, I need a loan top of 11 million dirhams. And I said, for what? He said, I just got a contract with the company and I want to be able to service that contract. And I said, well, show me the contract. He gave me a one-pager. He said, this is it. I said, this is not what, don't get yourself involved in that, don't be naive. So the capacity building that we provide today is in conjunction with academics. We want to re-emphasize that there are certain risks that an entrepreneur needs to take. And I am very fortunate to say this to you, all of you, that today the quality, the DNA of entrepreneurs that come through the doors of Khalifa Fund have improved drastically, simply because of the fact that there's more awareness now. I'm sure that most of you who have the chance to go around in Dubai, there's a lot of businesses that we have been able to support. And in fact, actually, there was this one business I have to mention. Usually what I have is, I get an Emirati come up and says, I want to start a business, I need 2 million. So I need to haggle him. So I'm saying, I'm not giving you more than $500,000. Explain to me why you need 2 million to start your business. Convince me. So, and that's how the conversation usually starts. But of course, it's more towards putting together a business model, validating that, putting a robust financial process for us and him to start the business. And so this one entrepreneur, him and his sister, they came up to us and they wanted to open, they have an outlet here in the town center, they wanted to open another one. We were so taken away by their project, and we said, how much do you need? And they said, we need 600,000. I said, would you take 2 million? Yeah. Can we replicate this in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, in Sharjah, because we like the concept so much. And so it's always interesting to welcome people like that whenever they come through the door. I hope that we've been able to work with a lot of organizations in the private sector here in the United Arab Emirates in encouraging them to look at some of these SMEs as an opportunity for them. So we have, for instance, a young lady who designs abayas, and she was invited by the House of Fraser to sell her product. They've given her a corner and they take about 5%, I think, or something like that. So she doesn't pay rent, and she's selling her abayas in House of Fraser in Abu Dhabi. I think it was last year, according to the financial records, she outsold Ralph Lauren in House of Fraser. That's her sales revenue that she generates in that. And we continue to work with other organizations like the Shell Hook Group. They've approached a few of our entrepreneurs in designing certain products uniquely for their galleria outlets. We have also, Azadiyah have approached a few of our entrepreneurs through us and directly to see how they can capitalize on the successes that they've been able to achieve.
Great. This gets into thinking about some of these stories. Again, thinking about this question of, and the theme of employment, is this question of when you look at products and when you look at projects and proposals, I mean, do you look at them purely in terms of economic success, or do you have a specific mission to think about, will this generate, widespread employment? I mean, certainly light manufacturing would in a way that creating apps would not.
Correct. But you need both. You will always need the opportunity for innovative ideas to come through the door. Innovation doesn't necessarily mean always you will create jobs. I think social enterprise does more impact in terms of employability than technologies or SMEs within the STEM area. Again, going back to the Northern Emirates, a lot of the people we touched, they have approached my organization not just with an idea, but with the need to improve their lifestyle. And it wasn't just about themselves; it's about the whole family. So this is the impact that we create when we work with a disabled young Emirati who has had an accident and working in the army. And now what he does is he drives a minivan, taking young girls from home to school. And at night he works at the Fujairah airport, for instance. And then you come back a year later and you find out that his 2 sons are actually now working with him. His wife is taking phone calls, and he's thinking of buying another car, and his brother's going to work with him on it. So that's the impact that we strive to do. We've seen a lot of father and son work together. A mother who knows how to do wonderful toffee biscuits, but got nothing to do with accounting, and her son works as a teller in one of the banks, and so by bringing them together, you have a winning formula. You know, I think everyone knows that in last year, 2015, our president, His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed, has announced that the UAE will embark on an era of innovation. And we're trying to carefully make sure that with that notion in mind, entrepreneurs create more opportunities for themselves. So, and I'm very comfortable with the fact that especially young students or graduates who now have the ability to engage with industry and Khalifa Fund and academic in establishing a concept, that they have also the ability to go back to their colleagues, that wider talent pool that's available for them, and bring them into the whole equation as well. In fact, actually, I've seen one entrepreneur who shut down his first location and opened in a university simply because he wanted to get access to the research facilities plus the students who are working in that facilities to see how he can further develop a device that would diagnose cholera and other diseases in a matter of I think it's 8 hours or 8 days, I'm not sure, but in a much shorter period of time than you would usually do so.
And I think before we open it up to questions, I think, my last kind of set of questions has to do with issues that I think in many ways are both opportunities and threats to SMEs and the economy in general. I mean, so one is declining oil prices, which on the one hand, is an important source of revenue, is the oil and gas sector in Abu Dhabi is less than it is in some of other areas, but it's still an important component. But on the other hand, that may put more pressure on people to innovate and create more business in the private sector. And the other one is the regional situation with the opening up of Iran, talk of increased cooperation across the region, lowering trade barriers. So on the one hand, there's a lot of opportunities here for small and medium enterprises, but on the other hand, there are also regional difficulties. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how these threats and opportunities.
Well, what's happening with energy prices is having a ripple effect across the whole economy, not just in the UAE. I'm talking about the MENA region. Governments are readdressing their projects. They're looking at how to prioritize some of those key initiatives that have been announced and signed off. It will have an effect on SMEs. In fact, that's probably one of the first statements I said in my first meeting in January when I had my first board of directors meeting. And that is, a lot of our SMEs, unfortunately, they have this vision, if they hit big, once they can pay back the loan and they can be on their way. And we try to bring them back to reality by explaining to them that they shouldn't be naive and going after big projects because they don't have the ability to service these contracts. They don't have the ability to meet the expectation of these big projects like the nuclear initiative or the Masdar initiative, for instance. They still have some time to go to get there. But they can still provide basic services. And that's what we're trying to thrive for, is for them to think small and then gradually scale it up. When we look at exporting our SMEs out of the UAE, we've been more successful in doing so to Europe and to Asia, much more than to the US or even the region. I think it's because in the region there's a lot of fierce competition, so I'm sure that SMEs out of Kuwait would like to establish themselves here and vice versa. So you'll see a cross intersection between ideas and how to tackle them. But Iran, I don't think, given the issue of security, I'm not sure that our SMEs would be on the bandwagon for capturing an opportunity there, at least not now. We have no jurisdiction when it comes to if they want to pursue penetrating the Chinese market, Southeast Asia. We've been also fortunate for some of our SMEs to look at Japan as a consumer market as well, simply because of the niche expectation they have. I hope that going forward, what we're trying to do is we want to encourage a lot of the financial institutions, not just locally but also international institutions, to really look into SME financing. I think one of the important legislation that will help that is the insolvency law, which is being deliberated on a ministerial cabinet level. And if once that comes into effect, I hope that then there are certain provisions within the insolvency law that protects SMEs, and I think all the stakeholders would understand how to manage bankruptcies, Chapter 11, Chapter 13. But I think the one also important thing that we have to keep in mind, and that is entrepreneurship doesn't have a nationality. And although we are responsible for helping Emiratis to become entrepreneur, we know that they need a strong team with them. And so when we engage with them, we have we're not biased in terms of who we're working with or why we're working with them. In fact, actually, we sometimes try to encourage them to bring in the right resources, the right caliber of people, so they can actually be more successful. But having to do that, they have to go out there and look for themselves. In fact, one lady called us once. She received the financing to open vending machines that serve healthy food in schools, and she wanted us to hire her staff for her. And we said, sorry, we don't do that. We're in the business of giving you a soft loan, but not get involved into your daily activity.
Yes, thank you. So thank you so much for this conversation. And I think we do have a few minutes for questions. If people in the audience have questions for His Excellency. Any? Yes, we have one. If we have somebody with a microphone coming for you.
Just a clarification, do these SMEs that you finance, do they have to be 100% owned by UAE nationals?
Yes.
100%?
Yes. So the loan, since it's purely about Khalifa fund, the structure of the loan is usually, depending on the nature of the business, it has to start where the entrepreneur has to put some equity into his own business. At the end of the day, it's his project. So they have to put some skin in the game, right? We started by asking them to put 10%. Now that has gone up to 30%, depending on how committed they are. And we honestly believe the more the money they put, the more they will spend time getting involved into establishing the business and running it. And that's what we want them to do. These are soft loans, so they're interest-free loans. I can't speak for any other organization that provides loans, but again, because we are wholly owned by the government of Abu Dhabi, I think Emiratis in general are very fortunate to have this opportunity, and I hope that they take it very seriously, as opposed to thinking that it's just another avenue to explore.
Yeah, true. But entrepreneurship is also about having the right people associate with you. Sometimes doing it alone may not be the best option, and in which case, actually Emiratis are very well placed to bring in, people from other nationalities who have the talent and have the capabilities in different areas to join hands with them. While they control the operation, they can easily bring in other kind of skills and capabilities so that there's a better chance of success.
I would agree with you, but then again, like I said earlier, we fill in a void, and that is financial institutions in the UAE and also in the region do not touch startups. So how would my brother, if he wants to start a business, if he goes to a bank and the bank says, sorry, I don't want to take the risk, where does he go? That was the idea. Now, in other countries, and I'm sure most of you know that more than I do, there are certain laws. I believe David Cameron, when he first became Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, one of the first things he said was, I'm going to raise taxes on banks. And so the next day, HSBC and a few others came up and they said, well, what can we do, Mr. Prime Minister? He said, it's very simple. If you allocate £25 billion to SME financing, I'll reconsider my position. And that's exactly what happened. Now imagine if you had that power here, in this region. I'm not talking about the UAE. You don't have that. So that's why we exist. And I've said it a number of times in some gatherings. Let banks finance startups, and they don't need me. I can go and do something else. But of course, we acknowledge that to be successful in establishing a business requires a certain set of skills and competencies that comes from different nationalities. And that's why we're here having this conversation today. This is not an exclusive session for people from the Gulf or Emiratis to understand what we do. It's just to tell everyone that we want to help Emiratis who need to have the exposure, the ability to rub shoulders with all nationalities from different parts of the world. In fact, one of the first things I forgot to mention is that one of the first things I wanted to work on was there's a program called the Erasmus Exchange Program with the EU Commission's office, where you can send an entrepreneur to work in a project similar to what he or she wants to do here in a different native country for them to experience the challenges there before they come back and they can do it here. Unfortunately, we didn't find enough people to be willing to go do that, simply because, like I said, we have a majority of our entrepreneurs on our database today have jobs, so they can't leave for 6 months just to go experience this opportunity and come back.
We have time for one more question.
Do you require board oversight from outside people in these companies that you finance?
Well, to be honest with you, we explored that. We don't have all, I'll be lying to you if I can tell you I can counsel someone, I can monitor him, I can track his financial records. It's very difficult to do all of that. A lot of the entrepreneurs, unfortunately in the beginning, were reluctant to work with third parties, advisors in monitoring and overseeing their project. We've had to keep it in-house. I don't like to keep it in-house, but it's the reality of things. If I speak to a consultant like Deloitte and say, listen, I have a group of entrepreneur SMEs located in the industrial area. Can you go and visit them and give me a report? When they go and try to see them, they won't let them in. It's as simple as that. So, I have to send my staff, otherwise the doors won't open. We tried to find a solution to it where, and I think it's going to be coming very soon. We need to start making these entrepreneurs accountable for the performance of their SMEs. And what I mean by saying that is that the fact that a lot of the SMEs, about 65% of startup businesses come back to Khalifa Fund for restructuring the loan. And that's a big task. What I mean by that is, for instance, I've taken a loan for $1 million dirhams and I said, okay, I'm going to, part of the $1 million dirhams, I'm going to spend 150,000 or 100,000, sorry, on rent. And I need 2 cars. It's going to cost me another 100,000. And I need this and I need that. And so when I sign the contracts and I get the money from Khalifa Fund and I go to try to secure a place, the rent's gone up. Now it's 120,000. But I don't want to put the extra money. I don't have the money. So I go back to Khalifa Fund and I say, listen, I want to restructure my loan now. I can live with 1 car instead of 2. So the 50,000 that I would allocate it for the second car, I'm going to restructure it and put it back into, reallocate it into rent. So we do a lot of these transactions. In fact, actually, that takes a lot of our time, to be honest with you. It's not just meeting people and giving them the money. It's actually looking at the performance of these businesses. That takes a lot of our time. But if we're going to do that, we want to make sure that if I send a partner, a third-party partner, to go out and assess his project, his or her project, then they should be able to get access to everything. Otherwise, I'm not going to entertain such requests. So we got a lot of these requests.
Okay. We'll allow one last question, and then we'll have lunch. So.
What is the percentage of failure that you have in your?
I love your question. Define failure, please.
I mean that people never were able to succeed after 3 years, and they had to close their business.
What's success? Pay back the loan, operate the business, or have a job? Which one is it? Or is it all?
All of them.
Then all of them are failing. No. I get asked this question by His Highness a number of times, and I don't get to ask him the same way. But I can tell you for a fact that global indicator for SMEs to be successful doesn't go anything above 22%, 22, 23%. Our figures are much higher simply because we do a lot of hand-holding and because we do a lot of restructuring the loan. So if you go to a bank and you take a loan and you say you're going to spend 100,000 on rent and the rent's gone up, the bank is not going to give you any extra. You're going to have to cough it up yourself. And if you can't, you fail. With us, because we restructured the loan, you're still able to continue with your project. So the percentage varies depending on how you look at it. I like to believe, and by the way, I can tell you for a fact, I have an SME in 1 year generated 20 million dirhams and paid me nothing. Why? Because they think they can get away with it. Okay, we've taken legal matters towards that particular SME, and there's others who are struggling, and we do a lot of that. So sometimes we get young Emirati saying, listen, I'm really struggling at this period of time, or and live example, a shop and the highway in front of it has to go through construction. So now it's dead. There's no traffic. There's nobody coming to his shop, his or her shop. So they have to wait for 12 months until the road is fixed. What do? And they still have to pay me the loan. So they come back and they say, listen, I can't pay 40,000 dirhams a month. Can I pay you 20,000 for the next 12 months and then go back to the 40,000? And we do that. And because we're government, we have some leniency towards it. So that pushes the success, if you want to call it success, because other people call it you're just delaying the inevitable. But I'd like to believe that there is some success behind it, because although we're not required to, we would like to collect on the whole loan, but for me, as an individual, as an Emirati, if I can help an entrepreneur be on his way and pay as much as he can or she can from that loan, I'll be satisfied with it, because I've changed people's lives by doing so. And the government is fortunate today to be able to do so, and maybe not, and maybe down the road. And so we need to grasp at that opportunity. We have a number of projects that have failed in the sense that they have not been able to achieve the goals. And there are two main obstacles here. First of all, securing the right place. And again, it goes both sides, because sometimes the rent problem, or some people say, I want to open my project and it has to be in the Box Park. If I can't open it there, then I don't want to open my project. And he can't secure a location, comes back and says, I want it. I'm canceling the project. So that's canceled. The other problem is what was the other problem? The first problem was securing a location. The other problem was economic factors. So if you look at 2007 and prior to that, we had a number of projects that were in the construction side, and we had a real estate market boom. And then after 2009, we all got affected by it. So all these projects, they failed miserably, because there's no more real estate projects, at least not until recently. So we have to assess, and that's what we do, by the way. Every year, we look at certain economic activities and indicators and see how can we support that. Until a few years ago, if someone came up to me and said, I want to open a hydroponic project, we would have said, not interested. But today, the United Arab Emirates imports more than 85% of its food. We have a food security problem on our hands. And so we now encourage we have a program specifically for people who have farm to be able to transform their farmland into a more productive enterprise by using less water, less energy, and feeding the local consumer market. So again, these projects, they have to be assessed. I can tell you, and it goes back to what our leadership has emphasized on, the future projects will always require a sense of technology and a sense of collaboration with other institutions and other enterprises. Actually, I forgot to mention this in the beginning. A lot of people look at projects either economically driven or socially driven, and there's something in between. And that is, I call them lifestyle projects. We have a lot of lifestyle projects. So if people come up and they say, I want to open a cafe in a location, frankly speaking, because there isn't any cafe, and so I think people live there, and so they would like to have some coffee served for them. And that's usually, I would consider to be a lifestyle project. They start as being that, and then they transform into something a bit more competitive.
So, thank you so much. There was a lot of very interesting information here.